Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here this morning. I'd like to start off with some introductions, just so that everybody knows who everybody else is. It just helps the conversation and hopefully makes everybody feel a little bit more comfortable participating. So we'll start from the police standpoint. On the left, we have Officer Falconet, Officer Jordheim, Officer Nord, Officer Niemeyer. Our Public Information Officer, Jess Schindeldecker, is in the back, and Chief Sobolski is on the right. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go around the room and continue with the introductions.
Dave Blessner, Side Street.
Perfect. Thank you all very much for that. We're going to get started here today. We got a lot of different topics to talk about. I'd like to point out just a couple housekeeping things. The little blue boxes that are strategically placed, one in the front and one in the back on the chair, is actually a microphone. And so because this is a recorded meeting that will be played back later, if, like the introductions, for example, when we talk, not everyone can hear that on the recording side of it. So if you have a question, I encourage you to raise your hand, interrupt me, stop me, totally informal that way. But we're gonna have you grab the box, and you don't have to hold it right to your face or anything, but if you hold it kind of down here, I tested it out, it works pretty well. And then the officers have a microphone to pass around as well. So we'll get rolling here. Some things we're gonna talk about today, we're gonna look at our recent crime trends. Things are looking really good, crime number-wise, for the downtown area right now. So we're happy to bring those numbers to you, and we'll talk about some of those things that maybe have a safety feel to them, and we'll kind of put some context to that to kind of show you what the nuts and bolts of those calls are, to provide you some comfort and confidence about what's happening downtown right now. We'll talk about the river camps. We've had a few things going on down by the river with some of our transient population that's created some concerns. We'll talk about some partnerships in the community that we've utilized to help with that. And bar close and food carts, we'll get into that. And then Harm Reduction Division will talk about their current stats for both October and November, as well as their housing updates for the whole year of 2021 and what the current situation is there. And like I said, we'll have open discussion at the end, but certainly feel free to interject at any time. Chief, would you like to open up?
Thank you, sir. Just want to let you know that Sergeant Halverson has really put together a very adept report that's going to provide a lot of subject matter, pertinent subject matter discussions, we hope. We're going to be mindful of time, but there is a lot going on in the downtown to address crime, fear, and disorder. Our DROs and all of our groups and people that we're working with are really doing an outstanding job, so I think you're going to find this to be very informative. And if there's broader questions at the end, I'm happy to answer those, but I think Sergeant Halverson's got this pretty well in shape, and you'll find this to be very informative. So I appreciate your attendance, and for those that are watching, because a lot of people can't make it in person, I think just as he mentioned, be mindful of that, so the discussions and the information that we talk about here are going to go to a larger audience, which is outstanding. I think it's important for the community at large to understand just how safe and how enjoyment-filled our downtown area really is, and what we're doing to keep it that way. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right, so the reporting period that we're looking at, we're just going to dive right into the crime numbers here. The reporting period we're talking about is October 26th to November 26th, just to give you a snapshot. And the only area geographically that we're discussing this morning is the downtown area, so just south of Main Avenue, 7th Avenue North, and then the river over to 10th Street. So just a really focused area. What we call our downtown district is the geographics of what we're talking about this morning. Aggravated assaults, we have 3 of those recorded. We're going to discuss all 3 of those examples here in a minute to give you the exact context of all of those cases. GSI, that common term would be sexual assault. In this particular GSI case was a boyfriend-girlfriend sexual assault. We got 4 burglaries. We're not going to dive into all those. I looked at all 4 of them. One of them was like in the past 3 months, somebody had something stolen from a residence. One was a business that had some items stolen from it. Another one was a toolbox in a common hallway that was stolen from a common area. I didn't see anything super alarming or any trends or patterns with that. So criminal mischiefs, the only trend there was 2 damaged vehicle windows right around the October into November timeframe. So it's been several weeks now since we've seen that. Everything else, criminal mischief-wise, was just general damage to someone's property type of stuff without any obvious motive or connection. The thefts, almost all of those, or majority of those, is thefts of opportunity, meaning that someone left their cell phone, sit at their chair after the meeting today, they then walked out, realized they forgot their phone, came back and their phone was gone. There isn't a mastering of thievery going on. It's opportunistic stuff. A lot of lost or mislaid property where people are taking advantage of somebody leaving something behind. The vehicle thefts this time of year is really challenging in our part of the country because we have cold weather, and a lot of times people would prefer to leave their vehicle run for any number of reasons, just to let it warm up so they don't have to get into a cold vehicle and take off. Maybe it's to defrost a windshield, and there are people that will take advantage of that. So we encourage people to utilize auto starts and different things like that to make sure that your vehicles remain locked when they're running without the keys in them so they don't get stolen. In addition to these calls, officers took another approximately 150 reported crime calls of lesser in nature. We're going to dive into the big ones here, kind of our part 1, category 1 crimes, to give you all that information and put everything into context for you here. So, like I said, first up is the aggravated assaults. So the first 2 here both actually occurred on Halloween night. You can imagine that's a popular time to come downtown, and both of those occur right around that bar close time frame. So the first one, 600 block of MP Avenue, was for an assault. Investigating officers identified that there's 3 males that got into some sort of an argument right about 2 o'clock on Halloween. They ended up getting into a physical fight, and one of the males actually was knocked to the ground, hitting his face on the ground, knocking his front teeth loose, and actually was knocked unconscious as a result of that. But all 3 of these people were mutually choosing to be engaged in this argument and fight, and then this was the end result. Officers showed up and ended up arresting Reginald Cooper, who was pictured on the right, for that aggravated assault. So that issue was resolved right then and there that night. Second one, like I said, also Halloween. About 3 in the morning, officers were flagged down in the 200 block of North Broadway. The male had indicated that he was assaulted with a baseball bat. Officers located both sides of this fight. The individual who said he was assaulted with a baseball bat was alleged to have knocked out a male in the other group first. So once again, mutual argument turned fight between these 2 groups of people, and nobody wanted anything done. The officers weren't able to take any sort of case to send to prosecution. Everyone involved just recognized this was poor choices and we're going to go our separate ways, more or less. So there's no pending criminal case with that one. And the last one here was from 11/6, about 10 o'clock at night. Officers were called to the Front Street Tap Room, 614 Main Avenue, for an unconscious male. Officers arrived. The victim had visible injuries but was alert and talking. The initial investigation revealed that an individual was punched by his, quote, best friend after an argument had ensued, and his best friend had actually knocked him unconscious for what they approximated to be 30 seconds. And the officers made the arrest on Cole Mitchell, who was the suspect of that aggravated assault. So certainly these 2 individuals knew each other, got into an argument, and it turned physical. And that's kind of the common trend. Aggravated assault has a really nasty name, but it a lot of times boils back down to people that are in fighting and someone gets knocked out and then it becomes aggravated. So just want to put that into context for you that there isn't a group of people running around assaulting random people as you're walking down Broadway. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page with exactly what those details are. So 2 of those are still pending prosecution with the state's attorney. Along those lines, I also looked at terrorizings because it can be one of those things that could be of concern. So 11:15, approximately 11 p.m., two individuals were actually at the engagement center right over here and got into an argument. One of the individuals pulled a pocket knife out and threatened the other individual. The victim in this case suffered from some mental illness and actually said the incident didn't even occur. So our department is working on following up with that victim to see if we can corroborate this and turn this into some sort of prosecution, but that's still pending at this time. The individual with the knife was trespassed from the engagement center for obviously the conduct there. So the last one here, 11:18, a male came into the police station to report threats. The only real reason this one is connected to downtown is the individual lives in the downtown community, but there was an argument via text message where he had borrowed a female money, he wanted to get the money back, and then the female had threatened to kill him via text message, but he lives downtown, and so that's where the victim crime occurred, so that's why it's connected there. So, any questions so far? Terrorizing, aggravated assaults? Feel free to interrupt me. Okay. We had 2 robbery cases, which is very rare for downtown, but I'd like to provide context to each of those as well. We don't see a lot of robberies reported in the downtown area. But on 11/8, there was actually a shoplifting that occurred. Could be shoplifting or theft, depending if the property was concealed upon exit. I'm not sure which one it was, but they stole some cartons of cigarettes from the Empire Bar. And the individuals then got into the suspect vehicle, which is pictured in the top right of the screen that you can see there. That's actually footage from our squad car camera. DRO Falconet was actually patrolling downtown and happened to be nearby at this time and pulled up to this incident right as the Empire staff member was flagging him down, kind of pointing like, that's the guy right there. And so DRO Falconet tried to turn around on this vehicle. You can tell that's Falconet's hood on the bottom of the screen. They're going opposite directions. And in downtown, that can be a tight turn on Broadway. So by the time he was able to get turned around and make some recollection as to what was actually happening, the vehicle had disappeared out of sight. So this is still pending investigation. I spoke with the investigator who's handling this case yesterday. We're trying to identify who would be responsible for driving this vehicle. The male was just described as a black male suspect. There were other occupants in the vehicle, both another male and a female. It doesn't look to have a front plate on it, and it looks to me like it's probably a light-colored Ford Edge of some sort. So if you think of anybody who might drive one of those that matches this description, or in your place of work or where you live, if you see this vehicle, if you could give us a call and let us know, we could connect it back to help solve this case. That one's still pending investigation. On 10/28, around 8:30 p.m., a male reported that he was walking on Broadway and somebody came and punched him in the neck. The male then fell to the ground and took his sweatshirt and 2 grocery bags. Inside the 2 grocery bags, he had been dumpster diving and had taken some stuff out of the dumpster, put into those grocery bags, and then that person stole that stuff from him. The victim did not want to press charges in regards to this report. Any questions on those 2 cases? Okay. Next is Philip Deary. We're talking about Philip because if you don't know who Philip is, you may come across him in the near future. He's got some propensity to frequent downtown. Most regularly, he goes to the Jasper Hotel. He's been trespassed by our officers from the Jasper Hotel for a litany of reasons, most of which are disturbance related, where he's going there and harassing either customers or staff members. And so he has been trespassed from that location. Since then, he has continued to return there. And so our officers have been working with the Jasper very closely and collaborating on plans to get him in jail. And that has occurred. His most recent arrest was for trespassing at the Jasper on November 6th. He has kind of come onto the radar in a quick manner. 16 incidents in the past month is a lot. I mean, that's like every other day the police are getting called to some sort of a disturbance with Philip. That's why we're talking about him. On the back end of that, we recognize there's other things that contribute to the why, right? Like, why are we dealing with this person so often? And so the DROs have done an excellent job of collaborating with the mental health community within the jail. So our job is to maintain law and order on the street, which sometimes means arrest. But then once we get the person to jail, we work with the people inside of the jail that can monitor and assess the mental health that way to try to put some long-term resolution to this problem. And we've also been working with Southeast Human Services to share information with them about this individual, trying to make those connections in the mental health community to get people the help to get better so that we can solve these problems, because obviously there's something going on here. We don't know what, but I'd also like to mention the Community Mental Health Collaborative and give an update on that. That's something that a lot of different department heads sit on a committee. The hospital emergency departments, sheriff's department, our police department, chief is our representative on that committee. All the mental health communities, Lakeland in Minnesota, Southeast Human Services in North Dakota, the ambulance, all the service providers, the Harm Reduction Center, Jan sits on the committee as well. So everybody is kind of have all the key players at the table, and we've talked about this at previous meetings, but just wanted to give you that kind of framework of who makes up the committee. And really the goal with the committee is to try to put a more streamlined process in place to provide assistance in these cases where when we look at calls for service, we're seeing that a portion of these are mental illness based. We need to put the right people in the right places to have resolutions to some of these cases, because no one service provider can do it all. So trying to work together as a team to provide a better care plan for some of these individuals who are suffering from mental illness and utilizing a lot of services in the community. So, Chief, anything to add on that part of it? I know that as the community rep, maybe you might have something. Just want to open it up to you to see if you did. I don't think it is. Okay, very good. Thank you. Anybody have any questions about that? Yes, sir. Get you a blue box. Thanks for giving that a try, by the way.
It's a little awkward. Is this so that people don't walk out with a microphone? So I just would like some additional information about the Mental Health Collaborative. Is this that all these groups are meeting together after the fact and looking at certain cases of individuals, or is this a outreach that you can contact, it's going to a call center and all those people have a chance at taking that call?
Yeah, very good question. Thank you for the question. So to answer that, really, it's kind of diving into the whole thing. It's not so much we're going to say go talk about Philip at that meeting. That's really not what it is. But it's more putting a system in place that will serve our community as a whole. So how do all of us come together as seats at the table and have our slice of the pie, and what can we all do better? And part of that is learning about what everyone else's capabilities and limitations are, and then finding ways to adapt to those and put a system in place that is faster and more effective, right? Because part of the problem here is who's the first one to come to the disturbance downtown? There's a guy screaming and walking up and down Broadway. It's the police, right? And then who do we call? We call the ambulance. And then the ambulance takes them where? To the hospital. And we're all kind of just playing our piece of the pie, but we're not necessarily working it as a whole, where maybe we could get these individuals connected with mental health services on a faster and more efficient basis to have lasting resolution. Did that answer your question? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the question. COPs and foot patrols, citations and arrests obviously are part of our law enforcement purpose and function downtown. The DROs have continued to be very active even with this colder weather. We've shifted some of our foot patrols from walking outside to some of those areas that have vestibules and corridors and the skyways and different things like that where people tend to push towards as the weather gets cooler. So you might see them in some different places where you didn't see them earlier this summer, or you might not see them as much in some other places. But that continues to be a big priority for us. We'll talk about how some of those frequent foot patrols have paid off with a couple recent examples here in a couple slides as well. 34 citations downtown in the past 32 days and 26 arrests. I feel it's very important to mention that the Harm Reduction Center has reinstated the Downtown Community Work Program. If you're not familiar with what that was and what it is, one of our DROs, our former DROs, Jess White, and the Harm Reduction Center worked together collectively to put a program in place for people that can't necessarily afford to pay off fines to work off their fines. And so that has been reinstated. Jillian and her team are doing that on Wednesdays from 11 to 1. And it's a $10 an hour rate to pay off some of those fines, because that's we get that question a lot, is it's great, you went down, you wrote a bunch of citations, but if nobody can pay them, how does that really solve anything? And so this is one of those really key pieces to that puzzle of how do we work together as a community to put something in place to resolve that issue. So we're excited about that, and we're very grateful for them getting that going. Anything to add on that, Jillian? Okay, a couple cases that I wanted to highlight, just some of the great work that the DROs have been doing. A lot of this pays off due to their frequent contacts they're making downtown, and honestly just kind of knowing who's who and what's what at all times. And they're always walking down there and patrolling down there and kind of analyzing who's who. And there's 3 different cases recently that paid off for us. The first one here, the DROs were able to locate, arrest, and identify a robbery suspect downtown. It's Ricky Garcia. He's pictured on the top right of your screen. Mr. Garcia had told an individual after he was holding a metal object to the back of the individual's head, seemingly to make the individual believe he had a gun, described as a metal object. The individual did not see a gun or anything like that, but then said that he was going to shoot the victim, demanding his wallet, hence the robbery charge. And officers utilized the DROs as a resource. They located the individual, identified him, and actually were able to make an arrest and recover some of the victim's property. He still actually had some of the things he stole from the victim on his person, which in the law enforcement world is really exciting. That's great evidence and great work, but it definitely makes us, shows that probable cause that this is the right individual for that crime as well. So we're really excited about that case, and certainly good work there. The next one, kind of the same type of thing, but this was a garage burglary case with a $12,000 motorcycle was stolen, as well as some riding gear. The victims of the garage burglary were hanging out around their garage and actually seeing who they believed to be the suspect riding their actual motorcycle, and confronted them and said, "Hey, that's our motorcycle, give it back." They didn't know who the individuals were, but they did get a picture. And so then we circulated that picture amongst law enforcement, and the DROs were a part of the group that was circulated, and they were able to remember that they had seen Mr. Gary Short that matched that description. They went and found Gary Short downtown, and sure enough, he's wearing the same clothes that are in the picture that this victim took from the garage burglary. So this case is actually closed now, but he was still arrested by our DRO team for an unrelated case, that being he had some outstanding warrants. So sometimes we can find creative ways to solve those problems. Maybe we can't arrest for the garage burglary due to an evidence thing, but we can arrest for the warrants and solve the problem for a period of time nonetheless. The last case, November 9th, a vandalism was reported at the Gardner Apartments, which is 26 Robert Street North. A male was caught on camera walking into the Gardner and tearing the cover off of a rent box. It happened to be empty at the time, so the individual didn't get any rent money or anything, but the cover of this rent box was torn off, which is what prompted them to watch the video. DROs took the still shots of that video and were able to identify Xavier Harvey walking downtown. Once again, he is wearing the same sweatshirt, the same pants, and the same belt, as well as some other physical distinctive features that matched up very well with the video that was provided to the officers. In this case as well, he was arrested for warrants, possession of meth, and meth paraphernalia. So that case is closed as well. Each of those last 2 cases has some piece of missing evidence for the prosecution of the original crime, where we would need additional information we don't have at this time, so they could certainly be reopened later. So. Any questions on those 3 cases? Let me catch my breath here for 1 second, and we'll transition to camps downtown. So this was brought to our attention by the DROs and the Harm Reduction Center, who are working diligently to serve the unhoused population in the downtown area. Every year we've seen kind of this push towards along the river where people are camping and hanging out, seemingly off the radar. And I think that's part of the appeal, is they can still come and go from downtown, but they can hang out by the river and kind of stay out of the way. And the groups got to be a little bit large, and there was several safety concerns. The Harm Reduction Center had some unconfirmed information of some potential assaults that were occurring down there. There was 5-gallon bucket of used needles or syringes kind of scattered about, and there was camps all the way from South Terrace all the way down even a little bit south of Main Avenue. And so citizens started complaining about this. The Harm Reduction Center had some safety concerns about what was going on down there. Officers actually found someone down there with a broken arm that had fell over intoxicated. So certainly we had to provide some safety and order here to this area. Albeit off the radar of downtown, it's certainly a concern, and we need to maintain safety for people that don't even recognize they need it sometimes. So what we did is we got together with the Harm Reduction Center staff, the Fargo Parks District, because they actually control and maintain a majority of this area of where this is occurring, and then river keepers who had a vested interest in kind of cleaning up this area. And one of the concerns is obviously we're known to flood, and if we flood, all this stuff is strewn about the riverbanks as well. So we got together, had a meeting, put our heads together, tried to come up with a plan. Our first priority was serving those individuals that were down there, recognizing that they may struggle with either mental illness, homelessness, or substance abuse. So try to connect them with resources and housing to give them a better situation. And so Jillian and her team did a great job. They've been working on it long term, but we set aside a specific week to focus on it as well. Where we just allowed that to take place to try to get people relocated and housed and connected with services. And then after that happened, the Parks District and the DROs then went back down there last Wednesday and kind of did a sweep of this area. And they actually ended up filling 2 garbage trucks, park garbage trucks worth of stuff. And what the DROs were witnessing was that people would be dumpster diving and actually taking trash out of the dumpsters and bringing it and dispersing it down here at the river. And so they got most of that stuff then cleaned back up. I think it's important to note that the DROs and the Harm Reduction Center also had a plan for people's belongings. Jillian does a great job with that as far as having a tagging process in place in case they weren't present so that we could reconnect them with their property. Because we know one of the struggles is that if someone who doesn't have a home loses their personal documents or their medications, it would make their situation much worse. And so I just want you to know that we're all being very mindful of the situation while trying to keep everybody safe in the process. So there was one individual present when that sweep happened last Wednesday. They left voluntarily, and then they found at least one other tent that was actually not on park property, but on city property. So we just got like a semantics thing that we're working through. So today, the DROs are going to continue working on that, and we've asked all of our patrol officers to have an extra presence down there as well, trying to keep people where they belong. Another concern obviously being the cold weather. You know, as we get colder here, camping down by that river is a huge safety concern, just the mere fact you're out there. So feel like we've got a very good plan in place. We're very happy with our partnerships with everyone. Certainly this is nothing we could do by ourselves. And so this isn't Fargo PD's project, but I just want you to all be aware of the good work that's happening down there in case anybody's watching who lives along that area. If you've been seeing fires or different complaints, this is the update. So any questions on the camps along the river? Very good. Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, you gotta have a box, otherwise they can't hear you on the recording. I can get you the microphone too if you want.
Yeah, I'm Mac Butler. I live in the Oak Grove neighborhood on South Terrace, and I'm one of the people who does notice the river camps for years. I've been there 40 years, and it's a long, I don't want to call it a long-standing problem. It leads to problems. I was pleased to see yesterday that several of the camps that were very messy since the cold weather chased people out have been cleaned up fairly well. There are other camps that I'm not sure are known about. I have some photographs that I could share. But my main concern is, having talked to police officers, I think 3 times this summer and more recently, who is responsible for cleaning up the camps? I spoke to an officer in Oak Grove Park last week, and he said, oh, it's parks. And prior to that, talking to an officer on the phone, he said, well, Parks is looking into that. So I'd really like, I don't even know which property is city property and which property is park. Sometimes it's obvious, but at the transition, often I ask city people and they don't really know. So I'd like some clarification on who do I call when we see, as you say, dump trucks loads of debris, and there's a lot of it still out there. Who do we call and who do we expect to respond? Because in the past, historically, I and other neighbors have had to clean some of these up, and it's a huge amount of work.
Yeah, thank you, Mac, for your question. And the broad answer is just continue to call us, and we can help coordinate that for you. We certainly don't expect you to figure that out. The short answer is most of it is the park district that controls that. We too have ran into some of those same concerns where we're down there with them going, hey, is that city property? Is that park property? Is that private property? Where are we at here on that one? And so we sometimes have to navigate those same concerns, which we'll happily do. But for your specific concern, I'd like you to hang out after the meeting, and I'd like to connect you with some of our DROs so we can figure out and make sure that we know about the current ones that you're seeing so that we can get those addressed for you right away here. So does that answer your question? Thanks. Anybody else? All right, we're going to switch to bar close. So one thing that we've been trying to work to improve is kind of the safety and order as the bar close occurs in the downtown area. Obviously, we have a large group of liquor establishments, a large population of people that come downtown, and then they all tend to want to leave at the same time. And so when you have impaired people with traffic and all the chaos and rustle and bustle going on downtown, we're trying to look at that and say, how can we make this safer? How can we make it better? How can we be more efficient with this so that we don't have somebody get hurt down there? And so we got together with some of the bar owners. The primary area that we've been seeing the most population of people at that time is kind of at that NP and Broadway area. So we kind of focused on that area to start the conversation. And so this is very much still an ongoing conversation. We're still looking for more ideas and we're still looking to collaborate. So if you happen to be a bar owner in the room, please consider what we're doing here. And I'd like to connect with you if you're interested in this topic and hear what you have to say. But really what the group kind of came up with was not so interested in like closing down certain areas, but trying to promote the positive activity of what we would prefer to see. And so what that ended up kind of looking like after this brainstorm session was having select areas in key parts of downtown where we would try to encourage people for ride sharing and taxi services. So instead of walking out of a liquor establishment and popping on your phone and trying to figure out how to get a ride home, and there's ride shares and taxis bustling all over and nobody knows who's it for and they're racing to it in the middle of the road because 5 different people have all asked for that same cab to happen and everyone's running out there. We'd like to put some order to it. So we're currently working with some of the big rideshare companies across the nation to try to see if we could select this by geographics, date, time, location, so that it doesn't affect business and commerce on a regular basis, but how do we encourage this to occur at that particular time of day on those particular days of the week so that we can improve that. And so what that probably could look like would be kind of picking a north and south point. The brainstorm session we've had so far has kind of suggested the 600 block of NP Avenue, and we would just be utilizing the south half of the avenue. And so that would basically be cordoned off as kind of a no parking zone. And so all those spaces along the curb would be for ride shares and taxis to pull in, drop off, pick up, if that makes sense. We're gonna do the same principle maybe up at 4th Avenue. We kind of talked about the police substation going in that location, which might be a good spot to have to draw people towards for the safety and security benefits of having a police substation right there as well. Does anybody have any other ideas, questions, concerns? We're totally open for conversation on this.
I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, so we're still in the works. The question was to explain geofencing. So we're still in the works of kind of figuring this out. I'm learning a lot about some of the rideshare companies, which is kind of fascinating how they probably operate even out of Canada, not even the United States, depending on your law enforcement contact here, and then there's a different contact there. So I think the next person I'm working on meeting with is actually in Arizona. And from my understanding, this individual is in charge of like the big events, like stadiums, like if you have a Super Bowl or a big football, like how do they coordinate that, right? And kind of treating it similar, where you could geofence an area and say, you can only drop a pin for rideshare in these areas at these times and days of the week is kind of the principle. And they feel like they have the software and technology in place to do that because they're utilizing it for other big events around the nation. And so we kind of just mimic that with our downtown to provide some efficiencies there. Did I miss anything, Chief? Oh, yep, we'll launch right into that. So food carts was the other part of that kind of came out of this conversation. Food carts have come up a few times from a few different angles recently, so we wanted to dive in and talk about it. We see the food cart thing as potentially being able to collaborate, and if we could bring people for ride sharing to a certain area, maybe we could bring them the services that they would like to have at the same location. Maybe we could improve lighting, maybe we could have officers that are recognized this is an area where most people will be gathering, and we can just improve everything as a whole that way. And so we've had some concerns with food carts from community members or residents of the downtown community. Some of those concerns are cleanliness, like there's grease on the ground. Some of those concerns have been noise, where they're actually playing music. Some of those concerns have been hours of service, where I feel like they're serving people food until 3 or 4 in the morning, and it's just carrying on and on and on. We've seen a litany of things, and so we're trying to dive into that to provide resolution for everyone, while allowing everyone to operate their businesses, but also trying to accommodate those that live downtown and making sure that everyone's kind of playing by the right rules. So we'll talk about what some of those rules are, and I had to educate myself, so I spent some time communicating with Fargo Planning to kind of explain this process to y'all. So basically, if you are a food cart company that wants to serve downtown, you have to apply for a permit. And there's an application process, and then that gets reviewed. The engineering department, the inspections department, the health department, and the police department all review that application for the food permit. One thing we recognized internally from a police standpoint was those were generally going to our shift commanders, which is an administrative position that's very busy, and they generally supervise all of our patrol division. So to try to take some of that weight off of their shoulders and streamline the process internally, we pinpointed one point of contact so it's easier for people to interact with us and easier for us to manage what's going on. So that's something we're working to improve. Some of the other questions were, can they serve till 3 or 4 in the morning if I'm trying to get some sleep downtown? The answer is no. Between the hours of 2 a.m. and 7 a.m., there's no service for food carts. So they have to shut down much like the physical establishments do. And a permit is only required in the public right-of-way. And so that was another misconception, was that if you're a private business and you own the property, that doesn't necessarily apply to the city permit approval process. There's also planning so that there's no amplified sound from the carts that's allowed. And we also have a noise ordinance that would protect that from occurring as well in the downtown area. So kind of like a noisy party ordinance, but it's actually even more restrictive. I think that the distance is like 10 feet for creating noise if you can be heard from 10. So almost like a talking conversation. It almost seems crazy restrictive. So be carefully applying the enforcement of that. But what planning talked about as a process would be currently looking to see if there are violations. Obviously, we want to educate people and just get everyone on the same page. And then beyond that, if we can't seem to work together collectively, we would look at enforcing citations or revocations of those permits if that doesn't go well. But certainly this is a learning process for everyone, and we just want to make it educational and get everyone on the same page there. And we see this food cart opportunity as something that could maybe pair with these ride share locations where we have these people gathering anyways. There is an ordinance issue with that there's a 65-foot standoff distance between both the food cart and establishment and each other. So we'll have to address some ordinance things, both on the parking side of it and the food cart side of it, to try to make some of these plans come together. Certainly some work to have happen there. So open for conversation. Anybody?
Oh, I guess it's right here. So, is there currently a problem with this? Or I mean, do we have that many complaints? For me, 80-some% of my residents come from outside of Fargo-Moorhead to move into downtown Fargo, right? And this is a culture thing, right? And I unless there's a real issue with it, bar closes at 2 o'clock, right? And so, I mean, there's carts out there all the time right now, right? I'm questioning if this is actually a real problem or not.
By problem, you mean like, are we receiving complaints about what's
Yeah.
occurring? Yeah, we are. We do get complaints, and it's generally from people that either live or work downtown that, like I said, we've had the grease one where the cart was really messy and then just walked away from the situation. We've had the noise one where they're projecting like boombox style noise, and there's like people dancing in front of this as it's going on, which we've had the hours as a concern where they're saying it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I thought this was supposed to be over with now. And so from a police standpoint, we're not here to side with, do we think food carts should or shouldn't be downtown? That's not what this is at all. We're trying to just be the conduit to make everybody coexist in a happy way, right? So certainly being mindful of what ordinances are in place and trying to help educate people on what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. But yes, we have received complaints.
And then with the rideshare pickup area, would that have an officer there during those peak times? Is that the intention? Like in those two zones, there would be someone near that area? Because when you congregate, you know, a bunch of people in an area like that, after they've been drinking, that's a concern for me, especially with the, you know, the location on the 4th Avenue one. So.
Yeah, no, valid concern and good question. And the answer to your question is yes. That allows us to know where people will be congregated, right? And so it helps us allocate resources appropriately as well, so that we can have, like I said, better lighting, more of an officer presence. That one location is going to be right by our police substation for that sense of safety and security as well. But yes, certainly gathering people would be nothing new to downtown at that point, but we're trying to help resolve some concerns at the same time. Yes, sir.
One thing that I would like to kind of bring up with representing the food carts is that 2 a.m. shut-off time. Would the city planning be open to extending that a little bit? Because my 2 food carts, we go out at 11:30 p.m. and then we usually wrap up about 2:30. I would say 70% of my business is done from 1:45 to 2:30.
Right.
So if I was having to shut off my business at 2 a.m., it wouldn't be worth stopping. And I like kind of the idea of the rideshare and moving the food carts there. But the one concern would be if they're kind of off the beaten path of where the bar goers go, we wouldn't get any of that business until later on when they start getting the ride shares. And I have my staff out there and I wouldn't be able to get any employees that would only go out and work for 2 hours a night to get ready. So that would be a hard thing.
Perfect. Okay, that's an excellent point. I'm going to jump in for a second. The other piece of this is safe egress and ingress. And other than probably you, has anyone enjoyed a bar closing on NP and Broadway recently? Okay. Stories you could tell, right? What's happening is we've got a large amount of bars in a small location filled with people who have enjoyed libations for many hours. And at 2 o'clock, that stops. And they're all being pushed into these streets and intersections. They can't find their Uber pickups. They might be parked on a street and can't get out. And they're congregating there. And that's where we're seeing fights, disturbances, all these things going on that we physically struggle to control. We don't have enough, we've actually had Cass County helping us on the weekend evenings to help with that particular issue. So the goal here is to push them a little further out, but not too far, to designated locations where they can safely get their rides, and we can monitor that, where they could also go and safely get food, because the other issue with it is the vendors, as they're congregating, that creates more mass. I'm waiting in line for my food, and 2 drunk people are fighting behind me, and the next thing you know, I'm in the fight, right? Because somebody bumped into me, and now it's all on. So, but in terms of your question, I think as we look at the ordinances, I wouldn't be opposed to extending the time frame if the commission was good with it, with the understanding that now you're in a designated location. So not only can I get my ride, I can go and get some, late night chow to help with that, after bar feeling. But it's going to be, so that's actually what we're trying to do is push out a little bit all those people that are trying to get rides and get vending, and then help push the rest of the people out so that they're not congregating there after bar close, because it gets quite chaotic at times. Depends on the time of the year, certain events, but certainly it's an issue that we need to address, and we've gotten a lot of complaints from people that live down there. Remember, we have a lot more people living in our downtown area who now, from 2 to 3 a.m., it seems like some nights all bets are off, and, there's the loud music and those other things. So we have to, understanding there is some cultural pieces to this, we have to change the culture a little bit, because we also have to provide, safe environment for everybody else. So I think the work that this group has done has been very good in coming up with some excellent ideas to start, experimenting and dealing with that, and certainly there could be others. So we certainly entertain that suggestion.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other downtown bar close questions? Okay. Let me just take the opportunity to jump back to your mental health question. It was a long walk, so I thought I'd wait. The other thing that's happening with that group is there's actually a grant that's being applied for to create some teams, response teams for mental health that would allow us to pass off certain situations quicker. I think very similar to what Mobile Crisis and Jillian's group and those folks do downtown, working with us now on detox and some of these mental health issues. So we're trying to, expand those resources with all these different groups as much as we can to minimize, to the extent we can, our involvement, or allow us a better option, a better, quicker option than the many hours we sometimes have to spend with these folks, so that we can do other law enforcement related things. So those conversations and those plans are underway. One thing I guess maybe would be of interest to you to know is that, we have a shared dispatch facility. We have shared services across the river. Minnesota passed a law called Travis's Law that until recently we weren't aware of, that requires dispatch to send these mental health teams to these calls, requires by law. So that's a new issue that we have to deal with, because now as a shared dispatch center, if we're putting together this grant and this program, and the Minnesota law requires these resources to be sent every time, we aren't going to have any resources in Fargo. So that's a new glitch in the thought and the programming of what's going on that we're going to have to deal with. And for as much as we enjoy our collaborations and our work across the river, this is a potential issue that we're going to have to figure out, because there are only so many people on the mental health side and the EMS side and on the police side to do that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chief. All right, so this is, we're getting towards the end of our presentation here, but we got 4 different kind of miscellaneous items that I wanted to touch on real quickly here. First off, I wanted to refresh everyone's memory that we recently had an active threat training. It's a very good training. It teaches you what some potential actions are that you can take if an active threat was to come to your place of business. It also pertains to just how you conduct yourself out in public, or anytime that you could potentially encounter someone in a threatening situation. Talks about buddy aid and self-aid as far as tourniquet application, different things like that. And with some of the recent events, both locally and around the country, I know this is of interest to some businesses. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a reminder that we are here to connect you with the right resources, training, and education to make you and your staff feel prepared in those situations. And so if you're at all interested in that, grab me after the meeting and we can work to set something up for you. The police downtown substation, I know most everyone is excited to have us as a neighbor downtown again, and we're very excited as well. So that's coming along. We are hopeful that end of spring, beginning of summer, we will have our DROs all will be housed out of that police substation downtown in the 500 block of 4th Avenue North, be on the east side of the Mercantile Building. That'll also draw a lot of other officers down there. We'll have report writing stations, restroom facilities, a place to sit down and heat up their lunch if they're going to have a lunch break. So we'll be drawing a lot more officers from just outside of downtown into that, right in the heart of downtown as well, which we're excited about for that additional presence and patrol. The last thing I have, well, 2 things. One, we are obviously in the final stages of working with the DCP and Sarah and her team to plan the Holiday Lights Parade, and we're taking some additional safety measures and trying to think through all the potential possible threat situations with that, and putting some things in place to help this event go off as safely as possible. So I just wanted to reassure everybody of that. And then one thing you could do to help us out is look at your roof accesses. If you live or work someplace with a roof access, it's very problematic to have just anybody be able to gain access to elevated spaces in the downtown area. That could be for several different reasons, some of which would be like an active shooter situation, some of which would be a suicidal individual situation where they want to get up and jump off of something in that regard, which we've had both of those things happen in the downtown this year. So if we could get your assistance with that, the DROs are going to make an concerted effort ahead of the parade to follow up on some of those things as well. So if you have a business and you're watching this right now, you could probably expect to see a DRO stop by and try to encourage you to secure that or remove it in some cases. They're old fire escapes that were no longer needed and things like that. So anybody have any questions about that? We're going to transition to Harm Reduction Center and housing here in a second. Very good. Jillian, come on up.
Good morning. So for those of you that do not know who I am, my name is Jillian Gould. I am the Homeless Outreach Coordinator for the Harm Reduction Division of Fargo-Cass Public Health. That incorporates all of these programs up on the screen. Specifically, Gladys Ray is where we started, the Gladys Ray Shelter, which I'm happy to tell you has moved from the Downtown Engagement Center back to our First Avenue South location. Our renovation project is finally done, and we're very happy to be home in that building. I currently oversee our street outreach and our mobile outreach program. We operate Fargo Detox, which is known as the Withdrawal Management Unit, and then the Harm Reduction Center and the Engagement Center downtown. I wanted to touch on our mobile outreach program stats for October and November. So the mobile outreach program, the main goal of that is to respond to those that are in a crisis related to their substance use. So maybe it's somebody passed out on a bench on 4th and Broadway, or somebody out at Sanford that was seen for over intoxication, needs to come to one of the area detox centers. In October, it was our busiest month of the year as far as transports go. So we transported 249 times to 198 individuals. 50 of those transportations were just initiated by staff driving around, knowing frequent spots, checking areas where we know folks are hanging out. And 23 of those referrals were from Fargo Police. While staff are not doing transports, they're doing a lot of housing supports to those that we've housed to make sure that we keep them housed. We did 257 in October, as well as 840 street outreach contacts through the month of October. I think some of you might remember in July we had over 1,000. As weather gets colder, people just aren't out and about on the street as much, but as we are able, we're out making sure that folks have access to someplace warm, have enough gear, things like that. November so far has been a little bit slower, but that's pretty typical as months get colder. We don't have as many people out and about, but still steady. And as you can see, the numbers are pretty much on par for kind of where we have been. I'm going to invite Leah up, who's our amazing housing coordinator at housing some of our most difficult to house.
Hello, I am Leah. I am the program coordinator for the programs. This year was not as many as last year. We had just over, I think it was 44, 47 housed last year. Part of that was when COVID hit, they had more vouchers available that we were able to take and get people housed with. This year it's been a little slower. They did just get some of their vouchers like we had last year, which actually help pay for the first month's rent deposit, and it also pays partial utilities. So that's like the bomb diggity of vouchers, and they are my absolute favorite ones to get because it helps everywhere all along. This year we had 13 housed in the first quarter, 6 in the second quarter, 7, and my numbers for the fourth quarter are actually wrong. We have 1 moving today and 1 moving on Friday. So we do have a couple more to add on that. And out of the ones, we have had 3 evictions or they had to vacate. A lot of the time we work with the landlord so they don't get a court eviction. We're able to work with the landlord so they'll let them vacate the unit. That way they are able to keep their voucher in most situations, so we can get them rehoused. Right now, we do have 32 rehoused. We had one person pass away as well. That's not reflected on here. And we actually have 8 or 9. We had a couple more that are just getting vouchers as well. So we're currently working on getting more people their vouchers. We have an appointment, 3 more appointments this week that they're actually gonna have their vouchers so we can start looking. We work really closely with Presentation Partners in Housing, who helps do some case management with their housing navigation program. And as many people as we can, we're gonna get on with them, so then they have that intensive case management. We still do housing supports as we're able to, but that intensive case management does so much more, because the whole goal is to get them into housing and keep them housed. We don't want people in the shelter. We want everybody in housing, and we want to keep them housed and move all of our programs mobile one day. That is our ultimate goal. We don't need 35 beds in the shelter anymore. Everybody needs housing. So one of the big things that we do run into is finding landlords that are willing to give somebody another chance. I know people ask about donations sometimes. We're kind of shying away from getting actual like furniture donations delivered to us. To Get Out Furniture Mission is who we're now referring to, because they have an actual setup that we have worked with all the shelters for many, many years on wanting a program like that. We're very happy that they opened up, and so referrals can be made there, and they can get dressers and beds and just everything. Any questions?
Where is that?
Yep, Furniture Mission of the Red River Valley, I think is the total. I know we have a like tons of different places in town are able to refer there. So if you have donations of beds or anything, you can get a hold of them. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
I just wanted to circle back to the encampment project that we've been working on. So throughout the summer, typically that's when we see more folks sleeping outside because it's easier, right? It's not as cold. So throughout the summer, we were well aware that there was many folks that were choosing to sleep outside. And through the summer, we were able to effectively outreach and engage them. But I wanted to give an example. So one of the gentlemen that recently was camped down by the river, I did his housing assessment in May. To try to get him housing. He was very active about wanting to coordinate with us and get into his own place. We just got his housing voucher yesterday. So it took that length of time. And it also took it getting cold for him to be willing to go into a shelter, because many times folks don't want to follow the rules. They don't want to live in a dorm with people that are burping, snoring, farting. They don't necessarily want, it's easier for some folks. When we initially started having conversations about the encampments, myself and officers were able to go down, and we were able to identify almost, I think, every single camp except for one. And I was able to explain, yep, we're working on this with this one needs an ID, this one needs a social security card, this one has a voucher and is looking. So just wanted to make that clear that we were really collaborative in that, to make sure that folks had options. If you're willing to come into shelter, we'll work to get you there. If you're willing to work on housing, we're willing to work on that. So.
Very good. Thank you both for that. I just want to back that up with that this is a huge asset to our community, both of their programs, and the police department utilizes them greatly. Our calls for service for intoxicated people have required a lot less response on our officers, and our DROs have seen people that have been habitually causing problems downtown that were unhoused. Once they get housed, seemingly disappear from the radar. And so we've seen great success with both of those efforts. So thank you both. Last, just a reminder, if you see something, say something. Sometimes I think people get frustrated where it's like, hey, this was going on and there was no cop there. Please call us if that's happening. If you see something that you think the police are needed for, please let us know. If you don't feel it's an emergency, but you want to tell us anyways, there's phone numbers for that, one of which is listed here. So please utilize those numbers. If you don't call us or point us in the right direction, sometimes we might not see everything while we're out walking around or patrolling downtown. So we encourage you to get a hold of us, and we will go from there. There's a lot of great resources we can get people connected with, and the bid does a great job of escorts and different things, and outreach does a great job of getting people housed and intoxicated people relocated, so, but it takes all of us, and all of you are all stakeholders in that community with us, and so we ask for that partnership in that way. I think we're 2 minutes over, trying to be respectful of your time, but we stayed pretty close. If something sparked your interest that you'd like to have a more private conversation or share some more ideas, the DROs, the chief and I will be around, so we welcome that. We want to collaborate and learn from you and see what ideas you have. So please feel free to stay after and throw some ideas at us or questions at us if you'd like. So thank you all so much for your time, and thank you all for coming today.